being said, to introduce Yolanda Friend, the outcome-driven Inclusion and Diversity Managing Director at Accenture North America. Please give it up for our lovely sister.
It is so great to be here. Again, Yolanda Friend, Managing Director at Accenture, leading inclusion and diversity for our North America market. And I just echo the sentiments that we've heard consistently as we've been together for the past day and a half. It's remarkable to have this energy in the room and to have this spirit of sisterhood that we're building, all of these connections and relationships, and ideally advocates for as we move forward in our careers. So we're all in for a real treat as we explore this panel and have a very candid, honest, and open conversation about finding the career path that's right for you. And this topic was really relevant for me today because when I woke up this morning, I saw the alert on my phone. Today, 18 years at Accenture. 18 years, and I mean, my Accenture friends know I was a child prodigy, so I started when I was in 8th grade. We know this. And it's funny because when I mention my tenure to Gen Z, you know, a lot of times they're like, why would you do that? What would make you stay at a company for so long? Like, who does that these days? And I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been doing some reflecting. And the first thing that came to mind was I've been aligned to my passion and my purpose for quite some time in terms of creating environments where people can thrive. That is what I love to do. That is my sweet spot, and I feel fortunate that I've been aligned to my purpose. I think the other piece I'm grateful for is having variety of roles. We talk about boundaryless opportunities at Accenture, and I really feel like I'm a product of that. I've lived that, and I've been able to move around and experience different areas of our business that has given me a lot of joy. So 18 years today. Some additional reflection that I have when I think about my career journey, there have definitely been some missteps along the way, and I'm sure the panel will get into some of these as well. First is the concept of PI, and you've probably heard this concept before, but PI stands for Performance, Image, and Exposure. And you know, I won't go deep into the methodology or the framework, but definitely take some time to look it up post this session. But it still surprises me that the model says that only 10% of your career success is related to your performance. 60% is tied to exposure. That means we need to focus on building relationships and connections. It's not enough to just put your head down and do a good job and hope somebody notices. And I wish I would have known that a long time ago. The other part is the concept of progress over perfection. I think for me, I used to try to wait until the stars aligned before I did something. Oh, I'm gonna wait until the kids are out of preschool, or I'm gonna wait and get that certification, and then I'm gonna go try to do something. And what I've come to realize is that the perfect conditions are elusive, and the stars will never align. And it's about taking action and maintaining a growth mindset, because as I do that, it keeps me open to learning, it keeps me open to growing, and that keeps me open to new opportunities in my career. And so those are the two things that I kind of think about when I think about my reflection of 18 years at Accenture and this career journey. I'll close with one of my favorite quotes. It's, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And I anchor myself to this because it does help me open myself to possibilities and maintain the growth mindset that I need to move forward. So I will pause. We're really excited to have this amazing panel. And Tracy, my friend, I will hand it over to you to moderate us through this session. So thank you all.
Great. Good morning. Thank you so much, Yolanda. Good morning, everyone. We have had an incredible morning at the main stage, so we want to hope to continue that conversation and shine a little light and just pull out some nuggets from this expert panel that we've got here. So welcome to the career path that's right for you. I am so excited to be joined on this panel by these esteemed women of power. They're going to share their experiences, how they've navigated. I love how Yolanda said that she had 18 years today. We're going to hear, I think everyone on the panel has had some longevity and has had career paths and career changes and pivots while they've been working. Me, I have had 25 years of experience in communications, strategic communications, politics, public affairs, worked at the NFL, worked for Bob Johnson, worked at RLJ Entertainment, and my career now is boss of me. And I started my own firm, and I work across politics, sports, and entertainment. So I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm going to say their names, give their title, and then I'm going to ask each one of them to give you about a minute of what they do, where they are, and then we'll jump right into it. So first, to my left, is Cleo Belmonte, and she is the real MVP. She is the Managing Vice President and Chief Counsel for Governance and Securities at Capital One. Next, we have in her shining bright red, Tamara Fields, who is the Austin Office Managing Director and the South Market Unit Chief Operating Officer at Accenture, hosting our panel today. And last but not least, we have Nicole Monson, who is the SVP of Equity and Engagement for the Estee Lauder Companies. So I'm going to start with you, Nicole, if you will just give a brief overview of what the job is that you have, what that entails. Then we'll come next to Tamara, and then to Nicole, and and then to Cleo, and then we will get this started.
So thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. So I'm a Senior Vice President for Equity and Engagement at the Estee Lauder Companies, and really what that means is I work to break down systemic barriers in the organization, both internally and externally, that prevent people like us from being able to move forward. I work to create an environment. We talked this morning about bringing your whole self to work. I work where you can bring your authentic self to work and leave some of those things that you shouldn't bring home, and making it a place where you feel seen and valued and heard, and a place where you actually have a seat at the table, a real seat at the table where somebody is actually really listening to you, and trying to create a space where you really feel like you can be who you are, but also help our consumers be who they are as well, and make sure that we are not just focused on our employees, but also focused on the communities and the consumers that we actually serve. So I really try, if I had to summarize it, I would say I try to make it a place where you want to come to work and have fun and be your best every day.
So everyone, I'm Tamara Fields. I'm a managing director here at Accenture. I run our Austin office, which means I have accountability and responsibility for the culture, belonging, and community of our Austin office, both internally and externally. In addition to that, I have the opportunity to serve as our COO of our South Market unit, which is a 13-state region, plus Puerto Rico. We're geographically arranged in North America for Accenture. And in that job, I have the profit and loss, so P&L responsibility, driving new sales, cost operational effectiveness of our organization and our business, and how that gets reflected up to North America and then ultimately to our global accountability, since we're a publicly traded company. And so I appreciate the opportunity to not only have accountability for people, but to have accountability for our business financially. And I think earlier today someone mentioned that it's important for you to understand how your company makes money. And I believe that that is fundamentally true. Regardless of the role that you're in, you are part of the fabric of that company. And when it's successful, you're successful, and it allows you to invest back in your people. So I'm very excited to be with each of you today and to represent not only Accenture, but to represent the colleagues and to be here with the colleagues here on this stage and just share some of the wisdom that each of us have learned over the years, both the good and the bad.
Good morning. I am Cleo Belmonte. I'm an MVP of Corporate Governance and Securities at Capital One. My team and I support and advise our board of directors and our C-suite and provide strategic and legal advice across a variety of topics, including corporate governance, public company filings and administration, as well as executive compensation, ESG, and a whole host of other things. We primarily see ourselves as really business advisors more than legal advisors. I have a team that is a combination of legal professionals that includes lawyers and others. And we feel that the goal of our roles really is to provide advice across the board to the company and the people that we support that balances legal advice, business strategy, as well as risk management to help be able to drive the company forward. And to the point of the other panelists and what we've heard this morning, it's so important, no matter what your job is, that you don't view it narrowly. It's very easy for lawyers especially to think that I go into a room and I give legal advice. But what you're really there for is to give business advice, because the business is in the business of being in business. It's not in the business of only complying with legal regulations and laws. And so I think that mind shift of understanding how what you do fits into the broader role is so extremely important. And me and my team have the benefit of sitting in boardrooms with our board of directors. We sit in our C-suite committee meetings, and we have that lens of being able to see how the most senior folks within our organization view the organization from a strategic perspective, a financial perspective, and otherwise. And we work with them and partner with them in order to be able to provide the advice that they need in order to help the company succeed. So I'm very happy to be a part of this panel. I really look forward to the conversation this morning, and hopefully we'll have some good questions at the end.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to ask each of you how long you've been at your respective organizations, and then I will ask the first question. So I will start with you, Nicole.
So I joined the Estee Lauder Companies about 8.5 years ago, and I joined in the legal department. So I am a recovering lawyer, as I'd like to think about it. So I led the employment lawyer by trade and led our employment law function, data privacy, and ethics for about 6.5 years, and then moved over to my current role when the company created the Equity and Engagement Center of Excellence to really focus on driving equity across the organization.
Okay, and Tamara?
Okay, so I'm a little embarrassed to say, but I have been there for 25 years. I'm one of those individuals who has had many, many roles at Accenture, which is great. Someone talked about that earlier today, how you can shift and move around, and I have done that. I've worked in all sorts of areas within my company, which is great, and I'm happy to talk about that today because my career journey has been circuitous, which I think is important when you think about taking on opportunities.
And then Cleo.
So I've been with Capital One for about 7.5 years. And I will note, I think one of the common themes that you'll hear from a lot of the panelists, throughout the summit is having a little bit of longevity with a company. And as we have our conversation today about careers and career pathing, there is this benefit to actually knowing the company, not only knowing how the company makes money, understanding the business strategy and how you fit into that, and being able to grow that over time. And so each time you start at a new company, you do start that process all over again. So the knowledge that you're able to build about those companies with that longevity, whether it's 5+ years, 10+ years, 20+ years, can really make a difference in how you're able to communicate about the company and strategize with the leaders in order to be able to help the company.
So I asked the question because I always think about how I got to where I am. And so the question that I'll start off with is, how did you get to where you were today? Did you know that you wanted to be a lawyer? Did you know that you wanted to be the boss of the South and 13 regions? At what point did you know what you wanted to do? But then from there, once you got there, and I love how each of you have talked about the different experiences that you've had within your organization. So you saw opportunity, so did somebody present it to you? Did you go after it? So I will just open this to whoever would like to start first, but I really just how did you get to where you are? Because I think that'll help as we talk about the career path, that you don't have to, be in a straight line. There are so many opportunities. So how did you get here?
I'll start, and I'll try and be as brief as possible because I think it's important to hear all of our stories. But the first point that I say that's important in my career journey is when I was a manager, and I decided then I was going to go back and be a lawyer. My whole life I had said I was going to be a lawyer. That's what I was going to do. I had decided that when I was 12. I had been working I came to Accenture with the intent to leave to go back to law school. Did the LSAT, got into the school I wanted, everything was great. And somebody asked me the question, why are you doing that? And I was like, well, because I decided when I was 12. And they were like, okay. So they started asking me some questions, and they really challenged my thinking, forced me to do a business case and really analyze whether or not I was leaving or going. I say this because it was an important point in my career, milestone career, because it was the point where I did that business case and made the decision to stay. And at the point that I made the decision to stay, I was like, I'm going to go all the way. And at that time, I was like, I'm going to be a partner in this company, which we now equate to managing director. And so that was the first decisioning in my career journey. And now I took on a lot of roles on my journey to get there. And I've been a managing director for over 13 years. So I've been part of the senior leadership of my company for a long time. But I've served in many different roles, client account leads, delivery leads, et cetera, because I work in the consulting business. But the next really point that I want to point out are two things. About, I don't know, somewhere, because time starts to blend together, in the last, 5 to 7 years, I had a point where my family hit a crisis. My mother got sick with cancer. My sister-in-law had stage 3 brain cancer, and I'm the eldest in my family and a caretaker. So I'm the person in the family that everyone calls. My father died when I was very young, so I can imagine I became the one to help take care of my siblings when my mother was working, and so that was a role that I carried my entire life. And I just, I'm very, very close to my mother, and I was the only person that lived in the same city as her. I took a career backwards move. I was on a very strong trajectory. Everyone told me not to change, but at the time, I couldn't emotionally handle the responsibility that I had taking care of her, which ended up being a 3-year journey, a 4-year journey for my sister-in-law. I had to be available. I could not be traveling every single week. I needed to come off the road. I had made a decision to be at every cancer treatment, at every doctor's appointment, at every radiation, at every surgery, and I took a career backwards move. And at that time, when I came out of that crazy, I was like, I mean, my career was not where I wanted it to be. I did not know anyone in the organization I was in, and I was in a very bad place, and I was going to leave. And I had a mentor. I ran into a mentor at lunch, and she's like, what's wrong? And I kind of had the whole shutdown, and she's like, let me help you. Let me help you get reconnected. Let me help you re-network. And my path restarted. I state that to say that you have these what I call pivotal moments in your career. And sometimes they happen because you're intentional about them, because you want to move forward, and sometimes they happen because life happens and it doesn't take the path that you want. But in that path, I had to restart my career journey. And in that, right, I was doing okay, but I still wasn't happy. And I got and many of y'all know her, right, but our global CA, I was at an event, and I was telling her my story, and she's like, you need a mentor. And I was like, well, you could be my mentor. She's like, I'm too busy for you, but I'm gonna give you a mentor. And she reached out to this person who reached out to me, and it was a person I had known way back in my career, and we had not connected in a decade. And she started meeting with me every week. And when an opportunity came to totally reshift our company, we reorganized. An opportunity came through her, right, because networks matter, to take on this internal role. Without her, I would not have taken this role. I had never done an internal corporate functions type role in the past. Didn't think I was qualified. And they convinced me to take this role. And so I say this to say that you're gonna have many opportunities, and a couple of things are required. One, you have to be willing. 2, you have to have people to help you on that journey. 3, you need people to help you think beyond yourself about what you can do and how to rethink about your skill set and how it's applicable. And 4, you cannot be afraid to recognize that sometimes you have to take a pause when life happens, and still you can recover to a path that leads you to where you need to be. So right now, right, I really appreciate the role that I'm in. I've been in it for 3 years. I have learned a tremendous amount. We can have a whole nother conversation around how I freaked out in the first 6 months. But I think that everyone's journey is that you're gonna have these pivotal moments, and it's about how you respond to those pivotal moments that direct you to the next place.
I think that, please. And I think what you've just said is, I mean, you gave us a lot in that response, but I think that really is what this panel is about, the opportunities, making the decisions. Life is not A to Z, it's A, X, Y, 1, 2, 3, pi, you know. So thank you for that. Nicole, the recovering attorney, do tell about how you got to where you are and the changes within where you are.
Sure. So I'm not just a recovering attorney, I'm also a recovering finance person. So I've definitely had lots of pivots in my career. I started out in finance and spent a few years there. You asked the question whether I knew if I always wanted to be an attorney, and I did. I was probably about 7. or 8 when I decided that. But quite frankly, right after undergrad, my undergrad degree is in economics, I was tired of school. And I needed a break. And I had chosen to major in something that would allow me to get a job and get some experience. So I worked for a few years and then went to law school. And then did big law firm practice. I clerked for a federal judge, and then did big law firm practice, and then did small law firm practice, and then went in-house, and then decided to stop practicing and started practicing again, and now I'm where I sit today. I'll tell you just a few points of how I got to where I am. I have made choices in my career by running to something, not away from something. So when you're thinking about what jobs you're going to take, what it is that you want to do, never ever run away from something. Be sure that you are running to something. I've also gotten where I am for all the reasons that you said, mentors, but as I became sort of further along in my career, understanding that I needed sponsors. The difference between a mentor and a sponsor, I was pretty senior before I knew the difference and before I really knew that I had sponsors, somebody who was in the room talking about me when I wasn't there. And the sponsor is not, unlike a mentor where you can ask somebody to be your mentor, sponsors see you because of the work that you do and your brand and that you are good at what you do. The other thing I would say that got me to where I am is my willingness to take risks. Not only have I made career pivots in terms of the work that I do, I've worked in several industries. I worked in finance, I worked in manufacturing, I now work in the beauty space. And so being willing to take a risk and understanding that each time that you take that risk, it might not work. Somebody said earlier that you're not always successful. It might not work. But I have come to think about things that don't work not as failures, but as opportunities for me to figure out what can I learn and what didn't go quite right. And then the last thing that I would say in terms of how I got to where I am is just that constant need and desire to want to do something different and to want to be better. And I've gotten to a point in my career where I wake up every day and do the work that I do to try to help other people and to try to make people's lives, better. I spent all those years sort of on the corporate side, right, doing corporate law, working in manufacturing places, and really trying to think about the company's bottom line, which I obviously still think about now, but never really being able to have the kind of impact that I wanted to have. And so I made a decision when I decided to stop practicing law almost 2 years ago, which was a really hard personal decision. And somebody told me, you'll always be a lawyer. Because I kept saying, okay, but I'm not gonna be a lawyer anymore. So you've been practicing for more than 20 years, you'll always be a lawyer. And so I got to that, and what really convinced me to take the role that I'm in now, that I freaked out to for probably the first 6 months, because I didn't know what I was doing. I moved into a space where, I had been doing inclusion, diversity, and equity work, just a part of who I am forever, but the idea that the company was creating a new function, that people believed in me and believed that I could do it, and made me realize the skills I had were transferable. And that's the other thing, when you're thinking about deciding to make a career pivot, think about what skills you have that are transferable. I promise you, your resume, your experience may not look exactly like the job description, but be really thoughtful about, I don't know how to do that, but I know how to do this. And they're comparable and you can transfer. And so, it's all about taking risks and being willing to know when it's time to do something different. And that's the last thing I'll leave you with. There is, you get to a point where maybe you've done all that you can do, either because of the organization or because of you. And you have to be able to make a decision that, you're gonna do something else. And earlier in my career, I was chasing dollars. And I'll be very honest about that. I was chasing a paycheck. And so I made career decisions in large part based on how much money I was gonna make. I'm at a point in my life now where I make career decisions based on, am I fulfilled, am I satisfied, and am I able to impact somebody else's life?
So that's very critical. I know young in careers, like, oh my gosh, I've got to make this money, but we work really, really hard, and as Black women, we have to work 3 times as hard. So if we're gonna do that, we need to wake up every morning and love what we do. So that just from an authentic self is something that we need to do. Cleo, how did you get here?
So I think very similar to the other panelist, it's one of those things where you do have to make choices as you go through your career. It's very interesting to me that all of us wanted to be lawyers as little girls, and I'm the only one that's sitting here still a lawyer. But I will say I did want to be a lawyer when I was younger. I'm from a very small town in Florida, so the idea, the concept of what a lawyer was very narrow to me. In my wildest dreams, I would have never dreamed like that I would have the job that I have today, or be able to sit in rooms and advise multi-billion-dollar companies. I've done it for 3 different multi-billion-dollar companies and advising CEOs and in rooms that I never even knew existed when I was a little girl. So I would say how I got here is sort of a series of choices that kind of happened in somewhat by accident, I would say. You know, I went to college just like everybody else, so I wanted to go to law school, and I was one of those folks who, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I went to the schools that gave me money. And I ended up in DC at Georgetown for law school. And then, you know, sort of took the big law firm jobs while I was there and learned very, very quickly I did not want to make a career as a big law firm lawyer. I worked a lot, I had no life, I was exhausted, and it just was not what I wanted to do. And sort of during that time, and then shortly thereafter in moving in-house, I really learned that there's sort of 3 things for me that have kind of gotten me and driven me to where I am. The first one, and I would say for my younger self and for each of you, is to first you have to learn who you are. That is a very difficult thing to do. There are people who spend a lifetime trying to figure it out, and they don't. But if anything that you can work on and focus on all the time is to really learn and know who you are as a person. The second thing I would say is learn what is important to you. And that may change over time, just like who you are will change over time. So it's a constant learning that you have to do in order to be able to achieve that. But knowing what's important to you at different stages of your life. When I first graduated from law school, it was I need to get a job, I need to make some money to pay off these student loans, you know, but eventually it was I want to have a personal life, I want to, you know, have children. And then your priorities and things shift. And that did lead me away from the big law firms. But the third thing I would say is once you have 1 and 2, you need to pursue that second thing unrelentlessly. And for me, it became a matter of being very focused on my own happiness and the happiness of those people around me and that were important to me. And so it is one of those things where, to your point of chasing the dollar and things like that, you do shift at a point in your career, because if I wanted to make a lot of money, I could still be at the big law firm and make way more money than I make right now, but I would be very unhappy. And so being able to get to a place where you can make those choices and pursue the things that are important to you is so, so helpful. And you'll be all the better for it. The thing that I'll know, interestingly enough, in my career is every single time I've changed jobs or changed companies, I have taken a pay cut and a step back in the pursuit unrelentlessly of peace and happiness. And I will tell you, I was at a company where literally I thought leaving the large law firm, I'm going to go in-house, I'm going to be able to, you know, have more time with my family. I didn't have any kids at that point because I refused to have any children while I was at a big law firm. No offense to people who do, but the work was just not going to allow me to spend time with anybody, let alone children. So being able to be in-house, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got plenty of time, I'll be able to do this. And I primarily do public company work. The company that I worked for was public for about 6 months when I got there. Had no securities lawyers, had no legal function for public company work, so I literally had to stand up the entire function myself. Like when I got there, we were doing our stock ledger in Excel. And I was literally typing formulas in Excel. Thank you, Florida State College of Business, for those Excel skills. Because otherwise I would not have been able to do that. But it just didn't leave a lot of time. And so, again, in just trying to kind of hone back to what I want, I found myself sort of being stuck and not having the confidence and thinking that I could do something else. And I was so excited, honestly, to even have gotten an in-house job. It's for some lawyers, when you're in a large law firm, sort of the mecca is going to an in-house job. And so they're so hard to get, and you get it, and then I'm like, okay, well, you know, I don't know if I belong here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the job. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it by myself. How much can I rely on outside counsel? And so that confidence for me was not there, and so I probably stayed there way longer than I should have. The company ended up being acquired by another company, and I took on an even broader role for that company. But I will say, you know, one of the pivoting points for me there is not only sort of this pursuit of happiness piece, but, you know, that mentor piece was really important to me. And the idea of having mentors and sponsors, probably more importantly, that don't look like you. I worked at a satellite engineering company that was very, very male-driven. I was the first Black vice president they had, male or female, in a company that was over 30 years old. And there were no other people that looked like me, honestly, that were not secretaries. And I'm just going to be perfectly honest. And so the sponsors that I had to be white men, because that's all that was there. for the most part. And I remember being at a meeting, and even back then I did board support work, so I was in a board meeting, and I take minutes for meetings, or at least did back then, and I was sitting at a side table in the meeting, and my boss, who was the general counsel, and mind you, all of the seats at the table were full of all white men. My boss literally scooted over, and he like moved his chair over and said, "Move your chair up." And for me, and I'm gonna get a little emotional, that was probably just a huge changing point for me in my career. I had been at that company for a long time. I had been in rooms where people acted like I was not there. I was in rooms where people literally would look to my boss, who was a white male, and ask him questions that were within my expertise. And for him to do that for me gave me the confidence to say, not only do you have a seat at the table, but you need to speak and you have a voice. And that's such an important thing. And if you never get that, you know, it's hard. It's very hard. And I think having gotten that from him was by far the most important thing. And it actually, for me, changed how I looked at my role. And I was working myself to death, killing myself. And I had gotten to the point where I was completely and utterly burned out, physically and emotionally. And for me, that pursuit of doing what is important really came crystal clear to me at that point. I had 2 children. I would be on calls at like 3 o'clock in the morning because we're doing some, you know, securities deal with people in another country. Like, it was just all kinds of things that was just so far from what I wanted to do. And I remember going and constantly asking for help. And I had a small team of people, and I would go and ask, can I get more support? Can I get more support? And the answer was, oh, you know, we think you're probably fine, or we're not going to do this. And I would tell them constantly, oh, this is impossible. The work that you're asking me to do is impossible without a bigger team. But I kept doing it. Right. I kept doing it. And we as Black women often feel like we have to keep doing everything and we have no choices. You have choices. And for me, I realized the power of brand. I had worked at that company for several years. I was pretty good at what I did, and I didn't know it. And it wasn't until I was completely burned out and I actually applied and got another job elsewhere. And I remember, and it was with the government, and I remember the person at this particular agency said to me, she said, I know what you've been doing in your current job. You're not gonna like it here. She was like, you have a lot of autonomy where you are. You're not gonna like it here, but if you want the job, you have it. And I remember going back to my boss at the time and saying, you know, look, I'm burned out. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna have to take another pay cut and go to the government because I cannot stay here. And I ended up having a conversation with him and with the mentor, not the sponsors, but with the mentor. And I was told, Cleo, what you need is a leave of absence. And so I asked for one. And they gave it to me. And I remember them saying, okay, well, you know, you have a bunch of vacation time, because I never took vacation because I was working too much. You have plenty of vacation time. You know what? I don't want to take that, though, because I need my vacation time for vacation. You guys have burned me out. I need a break. And so the idea was, so I'm going to still need you to pay me because you burned me out. And so I was able to get them to say, okay, fine, you can still get paid. Great. So I was told, okay, well, we don't have a system for which to pay you if you don't submit a timesheet every week. Yeah, not going to be able to do that. And so the head of HR went in every week for almost 2 months and submitted my timesheet as if I was there. Because I could not. I don't want to log onto a computer. I don't want to see anything. And I needed that time. And I ended up staying with that company for probably about 4 or 5 more years before, again, choosing me and happiness, and pivoted again, took another pay cut, took another step back. I was an executive at that company when I left. I was covering a broad swath of things within the department. And I really wanted better quality of life. I wanted flexibility that I wasn't getting. And so for me, yet again, it was, let me go and interview for this other job. And I remember sitting in the interviews, and this was at Capital One. I remember sitting in the interviews at Capital One, and the attorneys asking me, like, this is a big step back for you. Why would you want this job? And what I wanted to say, but didn't say, was peace, right? And so I was able to explain to them, oh, you know, I've been doing all these things, and it's so broad, I really just want to narrow my focus and really go deep. And so I was able to give them an answer that got me the job. But I was able to also get to a company that has a culture far different than the one that I left. And it's been an amazing decision for me. I will say, little did I realize the person who was hiring me in, my hiring manager at the time, was a VP. I was taking a senior director role. He was a VP, and I did not realize he was hiring his replacement. Because he literally had an offer for another job. By the time I started at Capital One, within 5 days, he told me he was leaving. And I've been doing his job ever since. And I will say the crazy thing of it is that they did not give me the VP job. They gave me a senior director job. And that was fine for a little bit. And so I started there in September, expecting to kind of ease and coast, because I'm like, oh, I can do the senior director job in my sleep. So I'm thinking I'm coasting. Within like 2 weeks, I'm in meetings with our CEO, with our CFO, you know, advising on earnings, advising on board work and things like that, not that I ever expected to do. And I came from a company with maybe like an $8 billion market cap. Capital One is multiples of that, as you can imagine. So it was just a very different atmosphere for me. But I will say the probably next pivot point, and I'm going to end because I realize I've been talking for a while, was when I had a conversation with my new manager, who was my old boss's boss. And I remember him saying to me, you know, Cleo, we're not going to hire anyone above you, so we'll let you do this VP job for the person that exited the role. And I said, that's fine. But when he left, I had no training. I mean, he was literally there for less than 2 weeks. I had no training. I had no transfer of anything. I'm trying to figure this thing out on my own, which I did for about 6 months. And then it was time for the sort of annual performance appraisals, even though I hadn't been there for a year. And I talked to my then manager about a promotion. And he said, well, you know, usually you have to be at the company for 12 to 18 months before you get considered for a promotion. You're going to need to kind of do the job and prove yourself. I said, I understand. I said, but if this person, I won't say the name, had left 2 weeks before I got here instead of 2 weeks later, you would have posted a VP role. I said, I would have applied for that role. Maybe you would have given it to me, and maybe you wouldn't. But we wouldn't be having this conversation. So we can talk about and decide whether at some point I need to get that, but it won't be 12 to 18 months because I won't be here by then.
And I think what you have shown, or what you are doing, is showing that you're not going to settle.
Yeah.
That you ask for what you deserve. And I think, you know, when we talk about taking a step back and then, you know, taking pay cuts, even in the roles that we have, when we know we've worked hard, we deserve the promotion, we deserve that raise. If we don't ask, no one's giving it to us. They're like, oh, she likes working 40 hours a day. You know, so it is imperative that we ask and get what we deserve. So thank you very much for that. I think the three of you guys have just talked a lot about what's happened. We have time for one more panel question, and I'm going to, Tamara, since you are hosting our panel, I'm going to let you I'll let you have this. But we talked about mentors, sponsors, having people believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Is there a time when you came to work and you don't feel like you were your authentic self, or feel like you showed up as the person that everybody thinks you should be? And how did you navigate that? And then how do you give back to the people that are following in the footsteps behind you? And if there's time, I'll let everybody else.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier, right? Which is a couple of things, right? I do think that the corporate America world has changed. And so I think that we are fortunate today to show up more as our authentic self. Because I'll be honest, when I started 2 decades ago, there was not a conversation about authenticity. In fact, I got an etiquette class, right, around how to wear pantyhose, white pantyhose. I explained I was black. That didn't really look great on my skin tone, right? And I think the expectations of how we showed up were different. And I was sharing earlier, we were talking about hair, right? And I was curious about Estee Lauder around whether or not you can come with, you know, your any hairstyle or makeup or look or flow. And I was happy to hear about their culture in that regard. But I was sharing the fact that when I started, I felt like I needed to assimilate. Just being honest with you. I wore braids for the first time this past year. My hair, I didn't wear it in a natural state. I always blow dried it straight, right? Because I didn't want the focus to be on my blackness. I wanted the focus to be on Tamara. I wanted them to acknowledge me and the intelligence, my capability, the skill set that I was bringing as Tamara. And I felt like every time I stepped in a room, especially then, I was always the only person that looked like me and always the only female. That was a reality. And I was trying to be accepted. And it took me time to recognize that I had power. I am a fan of women of power, but to be honest, it took me a decade for me to reach a place within myself where I could truly feel confident showing up as me in terms of all of my beliefs and all of who I am. I'm a very direct person. And most people today only know me as the Tamara of today, which means that I really care about who you are and what you represent and what you're about, but I'm very direct, right? A decade ago, I was not as direct as I am today because I didn't know how to operate in my authentic self. And I think authenticity first starts with you being comfortable with yourself. And someone said it earlier in our main panel, knowing yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to know the good and the bad about who you are. You need to understand your leadership styles. You need to understand your tendency and behaviors when you're stressed. You need to understand your perspective and how you're going to enter a room. And initially, when I came into a space, I acknowledged and understood the space I was in. And I was looking for them to understand that I had something to contribute. And someone said, I think you said the word distraction. And I think that is right. I didn't want them to be distracted by not recognizing what I had to contribute. Now, today we talk a lot about authenticity, and we talk about what it means to show up as yourself. And I'll be frank that when I embraced myself, my career did do very well. I was promoted to managing director. I stood out. I gained a lot of opportunities as a result of that. But I still understood the culture in which I worked. And I also understood that I had clients to serve. And in certain client environments, I could not just show up any kind of way, regardless of what everybody thinks. And so I had to learn how to show up as me with my voice, honestly and confidently, but I also took time to understand the environment I was in. And if I was the first time meeting you, I didn't want you to be distracted about what I was about. I wanted you to hear what I had to bring. And I wanted my voice to matter. And so I did make adjustments. Now today, I will tell you, I'm at a different place in my career and in my career journey. And I'm less concerned about what anybody else thinks, more concerned about the agenda that I'm trying to push forward. But I wanted to be honest with you that that was not, my journey had to evolve in terms of my comfort level with myself, my ability to embrace my authenticity, along with how the corporate environment has changed that allowed us to be able to step forward differently. But I do think when you've been in a company for 2 decades and your brand is established, it gives you a lot more latitude than when you're on the first day of a project, on a program, on a company, and they don't know anything about you. So I think when you think about authenticity, you need to think about the situation you're in. It is situational circumstance, and it's your choice. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to deal with the consequences of the choices that you make. My recommendation to you is to be smart about when you choose to evolve, respond, and represent yourself and how you choose to do that. There are many ways for you to represent your authentic voice without putting people immediately on defense. And so that's what I would offer.
Well, thank you. This panel was amazing. I just got we gave you 5 extra minutes, and now it's time for Q&A. So thank you so much. But I did want to just close by just saying, before we go to Q&A, that I love the theme of this year's conference: our time, our way, our power. And I think you summed it up with, you are who you are today. We show up as our authentic selves. We have evolved. We know what's best for us while still benefiting the company that we serve. But you know, we are our first brand first. So we can work for so-and-so, but Tracy shows up and Tracy's brand is first. Cleo's brand is first, Tamara's brand is first, Nicole's brand is first. So we will open the floor for some questions. I think we have time for about 2 questions. Okay, 4 hands, but come on up. I think the mic is right here in the back, so if you can just head on. First question, please tell me your name and state your question succinctly, and if it's to all of the panelists or to whom you want to address it to.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Kanika Rainey. I'm from Capital One. Cleo, thank you for representing so well. Appreciate you sharing your journey. And I also have to say a special hello to my lovely Spelman and line sister, Nicole Munson. Thank you as well for sharing your journey. We talked a lot about how we as Black women have to come into corporate America and pretty much adapt, right? Assimilate. We talked about, yes, there is, I think, a greater openness towards authenticity, but even that, you said, Tamara, is related to the situation. There are also boundaries, as we heard in the previous session as well. I would love for us to start having conversations about how can we inspire the leaders, the people at the top who don't look like us, to shape-shift, code switch, and bend to us. How can we start having those conversations?
So thanks for the question. I think first, as you talk about, how can we get to the top, I think you got to explain to them what code switching is. I think you got to tell them, right, what it is that we experience on a daily basis. This idea of authenticity, and people I work with know that I say this all the time, being able to bring your whole self to work. I actually think you shouldn't be able to bring your whole self to work. I think you should be able to bring your authentic self to work. And I think you get to what you're talking about by having the real conversations at the top, but also holding our leaders accountable. That's much of what is missing, is the accountability at the top. And it's a journey, and everybody's in a different company, in a different place, and recognizing that it's not gonna happen overnight, but also creating spaces where you can have these conversations. They're uncomfortable, they don't feel good, and sometimes somebody's feelings get hurt. But you've got to be willing to do exactly that. And I think you talk about corporate America changing. I think we're moving in that direction. Fortunately, I work in a place where that is the case, but I don't think that's the case everywhere. And you've got to be willing to just speak up and help people know how you want to be treated, and help people know what it is that you want them to see that you're bringing to the table. But accountability is huge.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, ladies. Thank you again. This has been excellent. A lot of what you guys have said have resonated with me. I, too, am a lawyer, did the whole big law thing, one in-house. I've been at, Amazon, Sony, so many different companies, and I'm also at a point in my career where I want to transition and do more meaningful work. I've identified some roles, but to be frank, it's a new space for me, and what I am struggling with at this point is how do I find that courage? How do I find that confidence to step into a new space, to apply for these roles, even though it's something that I'm not so familiar with, but that I do personally believe that I can do and I could kill it. But again, considering that it's a new space, where do you find that courage and that confidence to make that pivot?
Cleo, you had a great summary on our pre-call. Why don't you?
Well, I think some of it is just being able to develop the skill set, right? So a lot of it is to be able to create a bit of not only confidence within yourself, but make sure that you're able to instill that confidence in others. We've heard a lot about being sort of a forever learner and having a growth mindset. So a lot of times, and I will say I have tons of friends who are also recovering lawyers and who have decided to shift. I toy with the idea myself, I'll be honest, on occasion. And a lot of it is just being able to have the skills that you need to do the other job and demonstrate that to other people. Doing so will not only give you the confidence, but when you go into the interviews and you have the meetings with the people, you can actually speak their language. You can talk about what it is that you bring to the table. With that knowledge, you're able to connect the skills that you've gained as an attorney with the skills that you need to be able to do that job. I would definitely meet and partner with peers or others who are in the role that you want to have and really find out about the day-to-day and be able to speak to that.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing to that and just be very real about how to get the confidence? Sometimes you won't be 100% confident. Sometimes you got to walk into the room knowing, okay, I think I have this, I think I can do it, and sit in the seat, and the more you talk, then the confidence will come. But let's be clear that the confidence is not always there, and we don't have time to talk about it, but imposter syndrome is very real. And what you're talking about, I'm sure you can do it, right? You believe you can do it. On that belief alone, you can do it. So whatever the job is that you're thinking about, whatever those jobs are that you're thinking about, apply for them. And don't worry about not having the 100% confidence. And also don't worry that your resume is not 100% correct. You think about white men, they'll be 20% qualified and apply for a job. We wait until we are 150% qualified for a job. Apply for the job. You got it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, we'll take this one last question, and thank you all so much. Please quickly state your question, and the panel will be ready.
Thank you. My name is Bella Ma, and my question is for Cleo. Thank you, Tamar and Nicole. Cleo, you seem to have had a lot of difficult conversations around in your career, and I wanted to know how you prepare your mindset and prep yourself to having these difficult conversations without being perceived as a difficult person.
I would say it's part strategic and part just kind of doing it in that unrelentless pursuit. For a lot of the conversations I've had, I do my research and I make sure I have the information that's necessary in order to go into the conversation in a non-emotional way. Because I think a lot of times when we're having emotional conversations because our feelings are hurt, we're feeling taken advantage of, or we feel bad, that's gonna come out one way or another. I'll be honest with you, that conversation that I had called you would have hired me or perhaps not as a VP, so I'm going to need that. Yes. I will tell you, I had tears in my eyes during that conversation, but it didn't stop me from saying the words that had to be said. Because at that point, it was, me feeling like it was either that or I could not stay there. And at that point, I'm making decisions for myself and for my family. So there's no magic to it. There's no sort of amazing confidence that comes from nowhere. It becomes sort of a survival mechanism, to be perfectly honest, because I'm very much an introvert. And so having those conversations are very, very difficult. But when you are pushed to a place where it's either you or them, you have to sometimes choose you. And those conversations become a little bit easier when you're stating fact and can have conversations that are fact-based and not emotional.
I do just want to go back to something that Tracy said earlier, which is if you notice that when she was having her difficult conversation, she asked a question. She asked a question and she didn't make a statement. And I think that is also really important when you're having conversations, because what you really want to do is help people think through their own behavior and their own thought process as to how they're arriving to a conclusion. Right? Because sometimes, again, when you're talking about unconscious bias, is people literally are not aware of their behavior patterns.
Yes.
And so questions, right, are more likely to get individuals to a path of consideration than you just stating, like, what is your problem?
It makes them think. It makes them think.
So can we give a round of applause to Nicole, Tamara, and Cleo? Thank you all. Thank you, Accenture. Thank you, BE. Remember, we are fearless. We are our own Black, strong women. We are in a moment of our time. So be fearless, go out there, and be a woman of power. Thank you.